You think people pleasers are the kindest, most selfless individuals in society. You've been taught to admire their endless giving, their constant accommodation, and their willingness to sacrifice their own needs for others. Society celebrates them as saints, as the moral backbone of human civilization. But what if I told you that Carl Jung, one of the most penetrating minds in psychology, discovered something that would shatter this comfortable illusion forever? What if the very people you've been conditioned to see as selfless are operating from the deepest, most sophisticated form of selfishness imaginable? What if their apparent generosity is nothing more than an elaborate psychological manipulation designed to control others and feed their own desperate need for validation? Jung spent decades peeling back the layers of human consciousness, and what he found beneath the surface of people-pleasing behavior was so disturbing that it challenges everything you believe about human nature. He discovered that these seemingly altruistic individuals are engaged in a form of psychological warfare so subtle, so insidious, that even they don't recognize it for what it is. Pay attention, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. The people pleaser in your office who always says yes, the friend who never expresses their true opinion, the family member who constantly sacrifices their desires. They're not the martyrs they appear to be. They're sophisticated emotional manipulators operating from a place of profound selfishness. And they're using their apparent kindness as a weapon to control your behavior and extract what they desperately crave: your approval, your dependence, and your emotional energy. Most people will live their entire lives without understanding this truth. They'll continue to be manipulated by these covert narcissists, never realizing that every act of apparent selflessness comes with invisible strings attached. But you're about to see through the illusion. You're about to understand why Jung called this dynamic one of the most dangerous forms of unconscious manipulation in human relationships. The cost of remaining ignorant about this reality is enormous. You'll continue to be emotionally drained by people who present themselves as givers, but are sophisticated takers. You'll mistake manipulation for love, control for care, and emotional blackmail for sacrifice. But more importantly, if you recognize these patterns in yourself, you'll continue living a lie that prevents you from developing authentic relationships and genuine self-worth. Here's the first uncomfortable truth that Jung discovered. People pleasers don't give because they're generous. They give because they're terrified of rejection, and they use their giving as a form of emotional insurance policy. Every act of apparent kindness is a transaction designed to purchase your approval and guarantee your continued presence in their life. Think about this carefully. When someone constantly accommodates your needs, never expresses disagreement, and always puts your comfort first, what are they doing? They're creating a psychological debt. They're making it impossible for you to reject them without feeling guilty. They're building a fortress of obligation around themselves, using your sense of fairness and reciprocity as the building blocks. Jung understood that this behavior stems from what he called the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. The people pleaser's shadow contains massive amounts of rage, resentment, and selfish desire. But instead of owning these natural human emotions, they repress them and express them through seemingly positive behaviors. Consider the evolutionary psychology behind this pattern. Throughout human history, those who could secure their place in the tribe by making themselves indispensable had a survival advantage. But here's what's crucial to understand. This strategy was never about genuine care for others. It was about self-preservation disguised as altruism. How many times have you experienced this? Someone does you favor after favor, never asking for anything in return, until the day you can't reciprocate or you need to set a boundary. Suddenly, their true nature emerges. The mask slips, and you see the rage, the manipulation, the emotional blackmail that was always lurking beneath the surface. After everything I've done for you, they say, revealing that every act of kindness was a deposit in an emotional bank account they expected to withdraw from later. Society conditions us to see this behavior as virtuous because it serves the collective. People pleasers keep systems running smoothly, they avoid conflict, and they maintain harmony. But Jung recognized that this apparent harmony comes at a devastating cost: the complete abandonment of authentic selfhood and the creation of relationships based on manipulation rather than genuine connection. As Jung himself wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The people pleaser is irritated by authentic people who express their true needs and boundaries because these individuals represent everything the people pleaser has sacrificed in their desperate quest for approval. The most insidious part of this dynamic is that people pleasers have convinced themselves of their narrative. They genuinely believe they're being selfless, which makes their manipulation even more powerful. They're not consciously scheming, they're unconsciously controlling, which makes them nearly impossible to confront directly. But here's where it gets dangerous, and this is the second truth that Jung uncovered. People pleasers are emotional vampires who have learned to feed on others' dependence and gratitude. They don't want you to become strong and independent. They need you to remain weak and needy so they can continue playing the role of your savior. This is where Jung's understanding of the unconscious becomes crucial. The people pleaser has developed what he would call a complex, an autonomous psychological pattern that operates below conscious awareness. This complex drives them to create and maintain relationships where others are dependent on their constant giving, because this dependence is the only thing that makes them feel valuable and secure. Watch this dynamic in action in your own life. The people pleaser doesn't celebrate when you solve your problems or become more self-sufficient. Instead, they feel threatened. They'll often create new problems to solve, offer unsolicited help, or subtly undermine your confidence in your abilities. Why? Because your independence threatens their entire identity and their method of controlling the relationship. Modern therapeutic culture has made this problem worse by pathologizing healthy selfishness and promoting the idea that self-sacrifice is always virtuous. We live in a society that rewards people pleasers with praise and admiration, never recognizing that we're enabling a sophisticated form of emotional manipulation. Here's the test that reveals this truth. Try setting a boundary with a people pleaser. Tell them you don't need their help, that you prefer to handle something yourself, or that you disagree with their opinion. Watch what happens. The mask will slip, and you'll see the manipulation tactics emerge. Guilt trips, passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, all playing the victim. Jung understood that this behavior represents a fundamental split in the psyche. The people pleasers have divided themselves into the good self that they present to the world, and the bad self that contains all their natural human needs and desires. But this split doesn't eliminate the selfish impulses. It just drives them underground where they express themselves through covert manipulation. The dichotomy is clear. Some have integrated their shadow and can express their needs directly and authentically, and some have repressed their shadow and expressed their needs through manipulation and control. The people pleaser falls into the second category, making them far more dangerous to your psychological well-being than someone who is openly selfish. Consider your workplace, your family, and your social circles. The people pleasers in these environments aren't creating harmony. They're creating a web of obligation and guilt that keeps everyone trapped in inauthentic relationships. They're the ones who remember every favor, who keep score of every sacrifice, who use their apparent selflessness as a weapon to control others' behavior. As Jung observed, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The people pleaser cannot accept their selfish desires, so they express them through the back door of apparent altruism, making them infinitely more manipulative than someone who simply owns their self-interest. Now we arrive at the most challenging truth, the one that Jung discovered cuts to the very core of human psychology. If you're attracted to people pleasers, if you find yourself consistently in relationships with these individuals, it's because you're unconsciously seeking someone you can control and manipulate, just as much as they're seeking to control you. This is where Jung's concept of psychological projection becomes crucial. We don't randomly attract people pleasers into our lives. We seek them out because they serve our own unconscious needs. Think about it. Isn't there something appealing about someone who never challenges you, who always accommodates your preferences, who makes you feel like the most important person in the world? The brutal truth is that people pleasers and those who enable them are engaged in mutual manipulation. The people pleaser gets their validation and sense of control, while the enabler gets to feel superior, important, and free from the discomfort of genuine reciprocity. Both parties are avoiding the challenging work of authentic relationships. Jung understood that this dynamic operates through what he called unconscious collusion. Both people are unconsciously agreeing to maintain a relationship based on roles rather than authentic connection. The people pleaser plays the role of the selfless giver, while the other person plays the role of the grateful receiver. Neither person has to face the vulnerability and uncertainty of genuine intimacy. Here's the psychological mechanism at work. People pleasers trigger our unresolved guilt and shame about our selfish desires. When someone appears to be completely selfless, it makes us feel bad about our natural self-interest. So we allow them to continue their behavior because it serves our psychological need to feel like we're good people who deserve special treatment. But there's an even deeper layer to this dynamic. People pleasers are testing you constantly. Every act of apparent selflessness is a test to see how much they can control your behavior, how guilty they can make you feel, and how dependent they can make you become. And if you fail these tests by accepting their manipulation, you're proving to them that you're not someone who can be trusted with authentic relationships. The biological reality is that humans are wired for reciprocity and mutual benefit. When someone consistently gives without receiving, it creates an imbalance that triggers unconscious anxiety in both parties. The people pleaser becomes resentful, though they'll never admit it, and the receiver becomes guilty and defensive, though they may not understand why. Jung discovered that attempting to fight this dynamic directly, by trying to force people pleasers to express their needs, or by rejecting their help, usually backfires. Why? Because you're trying to solve a conscious problem with conscious solutions when the real issue is operating at an unconscious level. The people pleaser's entire identity is built around their role as the selfless giver, and threatening that identity triggers massive psychological defenses. The most insidious part of this pattern is that it prevents both people from developing genuine self-worth. The people pleaser never learns that they're valuable for who they are rather than what they do, and the enabler never learns to give and receive in healthy balance. Both remain trapped in a psychological prison of their own making. As Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The people pleaser believes they're fated to sacrifice for others, while the enabler believes they're fated to be served. Neither recognizes that they're actively creating and maintaining this dynamic through their unconscious choices. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look for it. People pleasers consistently attract users and narcissists into their lives, then wonder why they're always being taken advantage of. But the truth is, they're not victims. They're unconsciously seeking out people who will allow them to play their familiar role while providing the drama and validation they crave. Here's the ultimate truth that Jung discovered. the path to freedom from this dynamic isn't through trying to change others or through rejecting all forms of giving and receiving. True liberation comes through developing what he called individuation, the process of becoming conscious of your unconscious patterns and choosing to respond from authenticity rather than compulsion. The people pleaser must learn to face their shadow, to acknowledge and integrate their natural selfish desires instead of expressing them through manipulation. This means learning to say no, to express disagreement, to ask for what they need directly, and to tolerate the discomfort of potential rejection. It means accepting that authentic relationships require risk and that trying to control others through apparent selflessness is ultimately self-defeating. For those who enable people pleasers, the path forward requires developing what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to feel guilty about receiving without reciprocating, to tolerate the discomfort of someone else's disappointment, and to insist on the authentic relationship even when manipulation would be easier to accept. Here are the 5 pillars of liberation from this dynamic. First, develop radical self-honesty about your motivations. Before you give, ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to help, or because I need something in return? Before you receive, ask yourself, am I accepting this because it's genuinely helpful, or because it allows me to avoid reciprocity? Second, practice expressing your authentic needs and boundaries, regardless of others' reactions. This means saying no when you mean no, asking for what you want directly, and refusing to participate in relationships based on guilt and obligation. Third, learn to tolerate the discomfort of others' emotions without trying to fix or manage them. People pleasers manipulate through emotional displays, and enablers participate by trying to make those emotions go away. True freedom means allowing others to feel whatever they feel without taking responsibility for it. Fourth, develop internal validation rather than seeking approval from others. This means building a relationship with yourself that doesn't depend on external feedback and learning to value your own opinion above others' approval. Fifth, insist on reciprocity in all relationships. This doesn't mean keeping score, but it does mean ensuring that giving and receiving flow in both directions over time and refusing to participate in relationships where one person consistently gives while the other consistently takes. Jung understood that this work was not easy. It requires facing the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny, tolerating the anxiety of uncertain outcomes, and accepting that some relationships may not survive the transition to authenticity. But the alternative, remaining trapped in patterns of mutual manipulation, is far worse. The philosophical wisdom here is profound. True selflessness can only emerge from a place of genuine self-love and security. When you know your worth, when you've integrated your shadow, when you can tolerate rejection and uncertainty, then your giving becomes authentic rather than manipulative. You give because you choose to, not because you need to. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For the people pleaser, this means accepting their natural selfishness and learning to express it directly. For the enabler, this means accepting their own needs and learning to give and receive in balance. You now stand at a crossroads. You can continue participating in the comfortable illusions that keep you trapped in inauthentic relationships, or you can choose the difficult path of consciousness and authenticity. You can keep enabling people pleasers and allowing yourself to be manipulated, or you can insist on genuine connection even when it's uncomfortable. The choice is yours, but remember this: every moment you spend in relationships based on manipulation and control is a moment stolen from the possibility of genuine love and connection. Jung's brutal lesson isn't meant to make you cynical, it's meant to set you free. True freedom isn't the absence of selfishness, it's the conscious integration of selfishness with genuine care for others, creating relationships based on choice rather than compulsion. authenticity rather than manipulation, and love rather than fear.